Hello, my name's Dustin McClure, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're watching the Important Cinema Club Super Show. How is it different than our podcast?
They say that we have faces for radio.
That's right.
And we're going to test that theory now. I just think you go on YouTube and you see all sorts of people, your nostalgia critics, your angry video game nerds,
I need more white guy with glasses talking about pop culture.
Can we give the YouTube viewers even more eye candy? That's the question behind this. We're looking, once again, at two new or newish movies, and what unites these two? They're both by veteran auteurs who are working outside the system. One of them funded by a little mom-and-pop shop called Netflix.
The other one funded by all the money that he made fooling people to allow him to continue making movies.
We're talking, of course, about Steven Soderbergh and Jean-Luc Godard.
So I was really excited about High Flying Bird because I love Steven Soderbergh. Since we did the podcast episode years ago, I've actually come to like him even more, and the fact that he started experimenting with iPhones, being like, I don't even need to make films on Reds or Alexas, just give me my phone, I'll be my cameraman, I'm gonna buy a $200 Steadicam, and that's what I'm gonna shoot everything on.
I was reminded today that he announced his retirement in 2010 or so?
And he said that he was gonna focus on painting, and then he decided, you know what, this is boring.
Now he can paint with his iPhone.
That's right. And the fact that somewhere like Netflix exists where you can actually release these movies is interesting. So High Flying Bird's about a sports agent played by Andre Holland who during an NBA lockout decides to try some new stuff in an attempt to make waves for his star athlete who hasn't really had a chance yet to show his stuff.
Yeah, this young basketball player could be the dynamo of the season if only this lockout, this dispute between the players who are mostly black and the owners who are mostly white could be resolved. And what does he do? Well, not unlike Steven Soderbergh, he turns to Netflix. And I mean literally he turns to Netflix.
So it becomes very clear that this movie about disrupting the NBA system is also about Steven Soderbergh and the experiences that he's had in the last decade of his life, where he's tried everything. Bubble, release day and date. He did Logan Lucky, his own advertising campaign. Same thing with Unsane.
And this is a movie about the true disruptors, which is the Netflix corporation.
That's right.
Getting in there down and dirty. And they did pay the, I guess, $2 million bill for this strange iPhone movie.
So this film is essentially like woke Aaron Sorkin. Everyone's bouncing back dialogue, and what it's really about is not just disrupting the NBA, but actually being a black athlete or a black agent trying to disrupt the system.
Because, the white owners, who are this sort of ossified and yet powerful class, they think mostly in terms of TV and terrestrial rights, but this young black agent, he's in there, he's like, well, we can make a lot of money on streaming, actually. He's outsmarting them.
They even say it in the text of the film that basketball was a game that was owned by black athletes, and then the white people with money built another game on that game in an attempt to control it.
Who owns Netflix?
White people?
Yeah, okay, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I actually think it's a really good movie.
Yeah, and it is a really good movie. It's a script by the guy who wrote Moonlight, and it feels that while Soderbergh is doing all the same directorial touches that he always does, big wides, little camera moves, iPhone also kind of opened him up. There's like long Steadicam moves during speeches, and things are a little bit more kind of punchy in the dialogue than I've seen in a long time in his films.
The visual style I looked at with great interest. With the kind of cold digital iPhone technology, he's using it to render the city and its corridors of power as these sort of alienating glass and steel hellscapes.
So many wides of just the character walking through it.
Everything is in focus, and it's framed, in fact, a little bit like Citizen Kane, where it's like a lot of low-angle shots with the ceilings visible. I don't know if that was a conscious homage on his part.
He seems to be pushing the iPhone technology as far as it can as well, because he's often putting people in front of big glass windows, which the dynamic range of the iPhone can't really deal with that. So the result is something that he doesn't have that much control over. Or even when he's doing moving shots, the iPhone has a stabilizer inside of it that makes everything kind of like, it looks like it's pulsing when it moves, and he doesn't even get rid of that in this movie.
And because everything is in focus, and because everything often plays out in these long static shots with several characters in different parts of the frame, it's a little bit of a challenging movie to look at.
It's also a movie that he seemed to have taken the script and cut it down to its bare essentials. Like, it's 90 minutes long, and if you're not giving it your full attention, you will be lost at what's going on.
So I found it enjoyable. I found it a little bit cold and alienating.
So like every Steven Soderbergh
Like I do
film?
a lot of Steven Soderbergh films. He made Sex, Lies, and Videotapes. He made Traffic. You know, he can make movies that look like normal movies.
Yeah, he can. He just doesn't want to anymore.
He chooses not to, and that's interesting.
I mean, I love it, even though it's a little bit difficult for me to separate Steven Soderbergh as a creative person and the movie itself.
I think he encourages
that kind of reading.
You know, the movies are very much kind of about the circumstances under which they were
And
made.
I did feel a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that it is about the Black experience, and it is like a white guy telling the story, whether it applies to him or not. But in interviews that I've read, he said he was very uncomfortable with that fact as well. And the star and the screenwriter approached him and said, no, like, we want you to tell the story. There's other people behind the scenes and in front of the camera who this is their story. Like, it's not you being the sole controller behind this. I mean, I hope he just continues to make movies. If all it costs is like $1 million or $2 million for him to put a picture together they shot on his iPhone, he might as well make 2 or 3 a year.
And frankly, it doesn't matter that you and I are the only ones watching them.
No, it doesn't, because it's just content, a line on Netflix.
You know, we went to see Unsane, we went to see Logan Lucky. You know,
yeah, and we like them.
Empty theaters, but we were there, and you know, it probably made a profit just on our tickets.
You know what, Netflix? You should give us money as well to make movies and just have it one more little photo on Netflix with it's like me and yours face, probably doing the show.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So the second movie that we watched was The Image Book, Jean-Luc Godard's newest masterpiece.
Justin and I, our friendship is very much built on Jean-Luc Godard, I think. Many of our
we met at the Godard fan club.
Many of our early conversations have been about Jean-Luc Godard. He was one of our early podcast topics. I think it's hard to love cinema without having a love-hate relationship with Godard.
Well, I think that Godard represents an intellectual side of cinema that any young cinephile kind of gets obsessed with. And they're like, I want to understand this because it will make me look smart if I do.
Well, I mean...
Don't lie, that's why.
Sure. He's always doing interesting things with the camera and with editing and with... You don't think so?
Not always, no. Interesting is one way to call it.
I mean, you know...
Against the grain is another.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that is interesting. I mean, you know, Goodbye to Language with it. You didn't see Goodbye to Language.
I didn't see Goodbye to Language, yeah.
With its wacky 3D. I mean,
yeah, the 3D falls out of phase.
I mean, you know, he's 88 years old and he's still trying stuff.
You know what? That makes me happy, the fact that he outlived all of the French New Wave people on just probably pure spite.
Yeah, and you know, I just reread Richard Brody's biography of him. So my favorite story from this book is he's making First Name Carmen. He gives the actors this Beethoven record and he says, listen to this, everything will be clear. And then the next day they're directing a scene and, you know, one of the actors says, what's my motivation? And he says, didn't you listen to the Beethoven record? You're the viola, he's the violin, he's the bass. I mean, he's a crazy man.
So the problem with that is that Godard presents himself as a man who knows everything, and you're dumb for not understanding. That same author in that book has a meeting with Jean-Luc Godard, and they speak very briefly, and then the next day he shows up and Godard left a note on his door that's like, you are too dumb to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
And, you know, a lot of Godard's intellectual ideas, he'll say stuff like, it was Moses originally who saw the burning bush and then turned it into the Ten Commandments. And by supplanting text to image, this is why the Jewish people are accursed. What? He's an anti-Semite is what I'm trying to say.
And it's frustrating because, I mean, other than him being an anti-Semite, the fact that, like, you have those earlier, easier pictures.
Purely funny ones.
Yeah.
You know?
And that, like, people who really, like, fall in love with him, they're not watching the Image Book first and being like, oh, I get it.
But I'm sorry, if I could just dismiss these later movies easily, I would, and it would be
It's too ingrained in you, you can't.
No, I mean, they've all got, I mean, there are ones that I like better than others.
Film socialism.
I respect film socialism mostly on the level of technique and form.
That he's still making movies, getting behind that camera.
Well, you know, he's doing interesting things with that digital camera.
The subtitles, I can't do a Godard accent, I'm never going to try, are, what was it originally?
Navajo English,
yeah.
we called them. Where it was just 3 letters. So, I don't know, he's always doing interesting things with the form, but then, you know, when you kind of penetrate what is he actually saying, well, okay, let's talk about the Image Book.
Yeah, let's get to the Image Book.
So,
but we needed all that, like, rambling at the beginning to get to what this movie is. So this is one of his collage films.
Well, this is following his mammoth collage film, his 5-part collage film, Histoire du Cinéma, which was his big summative statement about film and its place in the 20th century.
Do you mind sharing what that summative statement was?
So, I mean, so many people respect Histoire du Cinéma not just as a piece of technique, but also as a piece of thought. And, its central thesis seems to be, okay, cinema was pure and it was uncorrupted until the Second World War and the Holocaust. It's the art form of the 20th century, and it didn't either prevent or bear witness to the greatest atrocity of the 20th century. And also, you know who started Hollywood? It was the Jewish people. Ugh. And they, how come they, perhaps they're an accursed people.
Other than that, it's a lot of like clips from shit like Vertigo and just flashing lights and colors.
Well, I mean, I think it's super fun to watch.
I didn't have that much fun with the Image book though.
Okay.
And I went in knowing what it was. And I read an interview in Film Comment with the person that he works principally creatively, who like edits the films, kind of puts them together for him. Mm-hmm. And he said stuff like, Godard would give it to me and he didn't know how to do the aspect ratio, so it would be squished and then it would pop open. And I'd be like, wow, this is art, accidental art coming together. It happens 30 times in this movie, and it's so annoying.
I think it is, again, on the level of technique, not as impressive as Histoire du Cinéma is, and I frankly didn't like it that much either. It is him tackling cinema's relationship to and depiction of the Arab world.
Well, that's the second half of the film.
The first half I have trouble penetrating.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's going on in the first.
I mean, it's super exploitative, too. He'll show, like, atrocities of bodies being thrown in the water and then intercut it with, like, I think you said this.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart fishing Kim Novak out of the river in Vertigo.
Fuck you!
So, much of the film is about the violence of representation.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I believe he helpfully in his narration, at the most lucid part of the narration.
Yeah.
Basically, it comes down to the West has inflicted a lot of violence on the Middle East, not only through its many interventions, but also through the way that it has depicted and propagandized against the Middle East.
I agree with that statement.
I agree with that statement too, I guess. I think there is a false equivalence being drawn here between the violence of representation and actual violence. And but, as with Godard, he makes it vague enough that there's plausible deniability for everything. So you can't really nail him on anything.
I mean, Godard once included Yue Kitamura's verses in one of his movies.
That was 100% one of his assistants gave him that clip. I do not believe he has seen Versus.
I would love if Godard was like, I'm a big Versus fan. Have you seen Azumi? It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Watching this, I was like, man, it'd be amazing if Godard became a fan of Rick and Morty.
Well, because Rick and Morty is comedy for smart people, right?
Exactly.
And Jean-Luc Godard is smart. I think this will probably be his last movie, right? He's 88. He has arthritic hands and he can't really work anymore. Another thing I think that is interesting about the Image book is he's basically given up on cinema as a tool of radical change.
Yeah, there was a period after his fun and funny films where he was like, all right, I want to make films as stuff that will inspire people to go out and change.
And basically the idea was entertainment is a bourgeois, anti-revolutionary luxury. So these films were supposed, like British Sounds or Vladimir and Rosa, they were supposed to kind of like shock you out of your complacency by being so difficult to watch and unpleasant.
But when people just like leave or not watch them,
well,
that was the one thing he didn't think of.
I mean, I thought it was a noble attempt, but it was clearly a dead end for him, and he seems totally disillusioned by cinema.
Except for the old stuff, when he was growing up and he was watching movies.
Yeah, but even that, I think he's probably a little saddened about now, because, again, it was from a Hollywood that was fundamentally corrupt and Jewish.
I wanted to go in this not to make too much fun of Godard and to treat him equally, and that those walls fell instantly when I started talking about him.
I mean, what we should say is that, I've spent so much time reading about Godard
me too.
and watching his films that he must be one of my favorite filmmakers. Obviously Breathless, Vivre sa vie, Weekend,
Pierrot le Fou, Infâme Infâme.
And then even some of the later ones, I think Every Man for Himself.
Oh, I really like Every Man for Himself.
Numero 2 is wonderful.
What about his Jerry Lewis, isn't it?
Keep Your Right right up.
Yeah, you like that one?
A little less so, I think. But it's interesting.
So, Godard, still a great filmmaker. I think that's the conclusion we came to, right?
I'm glad he's still alive. He's a connection to an earlier time, and I hope he's happy.
I can guarantee you he's not.
If you look on Google Street View, I saw somebody found him and Anne-Marie Miaville walking in that Swiss town where they live.
And it's crazy. He was wearing like one of those Toon Star shirts with like Bugs Bunny and like
big cowboy hat.
He does love Westerns. I was actually thinking that I didn't want to be completely negative with this, so I wanted to come to it with some suggestions. When you speak of collage films, Guy Madden's done some really interesting stuff. I think it's The Green Fog that he made, where he retold Vertigo using films that were shot in San Francisco, or took place in San Francisco. You didn't see that one?
No, I didn't.
Did you see Ross Sutherland's Stand By for Tape Backup?
Yes, I did. I loved it.
Because that's a movie that uses kind of found objects and collage to actually like tell a very personal and emotional and also intellectual story.
And I say, see the Image book, but don't have it be your first Godard movie.
No. Yeah, keep it on the list. But like after you watch the other ones.
But I'm always up for a Godard movie, and just to spend a little more time with this ornery old asshole.
So if you enjoyed this video, we're going to be posting new ones bi-weekly, so make sure to subscribe. It feels weird to say that kind of stuff. Like, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
End of video. End of cinema.
No. We also have a podcast, Important Cinema Club, that we post weekly. So make sure to become a member of that. I'm sure after you go through our entire catalog, you'll not have enough. You have to become a Patreon subscriber. It's a good one, let's be honest, on Patreon. And that's $5 a month. And you can go to patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club to do that.
And until next week, the balcony is closed.
I'm going to have to find a better tagline than that one.